the transfer portal, there are some good things. It's like, oh, okay, players have the freedom to move about and go into the transfer portal. Some people have made, unfortunately, the correct point about what the transfer portal is. For some of the players that do go in, it's the last time they're ever going to play college football for some of them. Let me explain a little further, and I'm sure you can piggyback off of this as well. And we'll talk about some other names that maybe Penn State could get familiar with here. But for the transfer portal, it's a double-ended sword because yes, all players have the freedom. They're not tied to a program. They have the flexibility to further their careers. It works out for them. But coaches and programs can also use it as a way to say, get off my team. You did not play well this year. We're bringing in somebody else to take your job. And it's just the harsh reality of it. So yes, I'm all for the flexibility and the freedom of players to make their decisions. But let's not ignore the fact that programs and coaches will use it also to get what they want. If they see a lack of improvement or they see deficiencies, they will tell you, you need to go in the transfer portal because we're going to give your scholarship to somebody else.
Yeah, it's, I think all in all, once again, I speak to it from an entertainment perspective, but I think it's all in all a good thing. But no, like you're saying, coaches can use it against players, and you phrase it in a way of, hey, you're probably not going to play too much here. You should, look around, and all of a sudden,
consider your options. Yeah.
Yeah. Consider your options, which definitely can be a good thing. But yeah, I mean, it's not ideal for, it's ideal for certain players and isn't ideal for other players where, it has made the game much more of a, quote unquote professional league that, you're not guaranteed, the 4 to 5 years like was in the past. I mean,
yeah.
I believe you grew up a Penn State fan like I did. Like we can think back to those fraternity years and the idea of guys like transferring, like never, ever, ever
happened. It was unheard of.
Yeah. So that's obviously not the case anymore, and that's not the reality of where college sports has gone, and especially with NIL deals and things like that, you're gonna have player movement. But even beyond players that kind of get that talk to that, hey, you should probably look at your options. You think about guys. I mean, I can go back and look at players from last year, the year before, where they enter the portal probably thinking, just for example, let's take a kid that plays at, I don't know, let's say Texas State, right? He has 50 catches for Texas State, and he's going to go into the portal, and all of a sudden he thinks he's going to move up and play at West Virginia or Minnesota.
Power 5.
Yeah, Power 5. And, oh, yeah, you'll come in, you'll play right away, and then all of a sudden he goes there and he doesn't play that much. Now, maybe that's, in the long run, a good thing that, that player maybe sees that, the NFL isn't going to be something that works out for them. But, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these guys, especially like, whether it's FCS players, whether it's Group of 5 players that jump in the portal at the first sign of some success, it doesn't always work out for them. And once again, it's their prerogative. They want to enter and leave. They want to challenge themselves by all means. But it's just not the college football that we grew up with. And, there's part of me that misses that, but I do enjoy it. And I think for the most part, it's good for players. I wish it wasn't so unregulated where, guys can transfer multiple times and you have that extra grad transfer year. And especially even now with this, I think will be the last of it, or at least one of the last seasons of it, of the, 6-year COVID guys, where all of a sudden, guys are playing at 3 different colleges or 4 different colleges, which I don't think is ideal for anyone. But, yeah, it's like you said, it's a double-edged sword, but I think Penn State generally does a pretty good job of utilizing it in the right ways, of taking players that they truly do need, and not using it too much as an outlet to push players out when they maybe don't live up to expectations right away. I think James Franklin certainly gives guys the benefit of the doubt when it comes to things like that.
There is the success with honor element to this. And at least, I mean, Penn State really does do a good job of towing the line of not being totally corrupt and slimy and unethical, but actually using it to the program's advantage without just saying, hey, you're gone, or we're going to throw millions of dollars at select players just to get them on campus. Crazy enough. Like there are programs that will give money and cut checks just to get a player on campus. And Penn State is not willing to engage in all of that. Besides the point, the transfer portal is also interesting from the fact of, let's be very honest, a redshirt junior looking for an opportunity to play 1 or 2 more years, a Dante Cephas type. I'm not talking about, let's compare Dante Cephas's player profile to any one of the wide receivers that are coming in the class of 2024. But let's be realistic about it. Every single college football team in the country, Pat, would take a veteran in college football over, unless they're a top 10 player that has all the potential in the world in the country. But a 3-star or a fringe 4-star is going to take a back seat and lose that scholarship opportunity to somebody that's, yeah, I played college football for 3 years, because they understand what it takes. They're already immersed in it. They're already developed, right? From a physicality standpoint, from a mental standpoint. And you have to think about it in that regard too, that high school players lose out in all of this.
Yeah, it certainly has changed the calculus for, recruiting and just team building in general. You go back 10 years ago, and perhaps it's just because Penn State has been recruiting at a higher level where they are pretty consistent. But I think even for, most people that follow recruiting, like, everything is so sped up now that, like senior risers and things like that just don't like necessarily happen all that often. And even when they do, you just don't have, schools and programs don't have the resources and don't have the room to, bring those guys in, because so much of their focus, like for me right now, it's all in the transfer portal. And I think that's generally the case when it comes to these staff as well, that, as the season ends and the transfer portal opens, you're kind of focused on that. But once again, I can't like sit here and like poo-poo it too much when I, look forward to it every year. I do think that like I think of it in basketball probably more so than football, but it does just kind of, as somebody who's just a fan of college football and college basketball, and take my Penn State fandom aside, it does kind of stink where, if you have, say, man, I'm trying to think of like a random college basketball team, Wright State or somebody from the Horizon League, where, they hit on, they bring in 5 freshmen, they hit on 3 of them, and they all average over 10 points, and boom, they're all gone right away.
They're gone the next year. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that is a shame, because I think you can go back, and I kind of use the Wright State comparison just because I know a couple years ago they had a really good team, and Grant Basile went to Virginia Tech, Tanner Holden then went to Ohio State. So you lose the essence of what makes college sports great when, just the top programs, and either it's basketball or football, can pluck who they want. But once again, that's just the reality of what it is now. And with NIL and the money that's flowing around in college football, once again, it's turning more and more into a professional sport every day. So you either adapt or you get left behind. So James Franklin has made it clear that he's not the biggest fan, or in the past at least has made it clear he's not the biggest fan of the transfer portal, but it is a necessary evil, if we want to call it that, in today's college landscape.
Absolutely. Now, we did promise hypothetical names, because like I said, I barely knew about the Riley Leonard situation. Mike Elko is leaving. I wonder if the Duke quarterback's going to follow him, but to go to Texas A&M, and then, well, he's all but guaranteed to go to Notre Dame. I saw him as an NFL draft pick. I thought he could go in the first round with his intangibles, but whatever. What do I know? I talk sports. I guess I don't scout enough. Here's one hypothetical as we look at the live comments here. Max says Julian Fleming might enter the portal because there's going to be a lot of competition for wide receiver 1 at Ohio State next year. Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is moving on. Appreciate the comments. Always appreciate the comments. Julian Fleming has not put his name in. That's where Penn State was down to Penn State and Ohio State. So this one, if there's still any semblance of a relationship, might actually work out. I wouldn't mind Julian Fleming. I know he hasn't had quite the career at Ohio State, but if Penn State can somehow pull him away from the Buckeyes, I actually wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, intriguing name. I think I probably would have had a little bit more interest, just me personally, last year. Obviously, Penn State still does have such a, Diaries at wide receiver, but yeah, he had 26 receptions this year, 271 yards, only 10.4 yards per catch, no touchdowns. Longest play was 37 yards. So, yeah, he has not quite developed the way that, I think everybody thought that he would. I just wonder if, the train has kind of left the station in that case, if it makes sense for Penn State. Again, we'll see. I think, I know we're going to talk a little bit later about, who could leave from Penn State's perspective. I think you're going to see quite a bit of turnover in that wide receiver room. So I do think that Penn State will be, going after multiple targets and multiple guys. So perhaps, something falls into place with Fleming, but I can't say personally as much as, I'll talk myself into Julian Fleming coming home, becoming an All-American by all means. But until that happens, I can't say it's something that I'm necessarily rooting for. You mentioned Riley Leonard before, right? So Duke kid that jumps in the portal. I would mention as far as guys that I'm kind of hoping jump into the portal. And once again, this is pretty wide receiver focused just because that's where Penn State's
that's honestly the only position I'm concerned about, Pat. I understand you want to get depth at cornerback, maybe linebacker, right? You can benefit from one or two players coming in at any spot.
Tackle,
like a Derek Tangelo. You don't need Arnold Ebiketes. I think you need more Derek Tangelos in this case that can provide a spark off the bench. But who are some of those other names that either at wide receiver or anywhere else that can either be that depth piece or that hopefully that star that Dante Cephas unfortunately was not this year?
Yeah, I once again, just going back to the Duke thing, one of their top wide receivers, Jordan Moore, he was originally from Maryland. I believe he went to Duke originally as a quarterback recruit, but originally from Maryland, had 51 catches this year for 688 yards and 7 touchdowns. Average size, 6 foot, 195, 200, but, good productive wide receiver at Duke. And once again, from Maryland, which I think, probably has some sort of ties to Penn State. So if he jumps in the portal, could be a name to watch. Malachi Fields at Virginia, once again, ties with Marquise Haggins, 52 catches for 722 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then one more ACC guy that I wouldn't mind jumping in, Jamal Banks from Wake Forest. He's originally from DC. He had 52 catches for 563 yards and 3 touchdowns. So just as far as, Power 5 ACC wide receivers go, those would be some names to watch. And then just 2 FCS guys. Holy Cross has had a couple guys jump in. Luke Newman, he's an offensive tackle that is an All-American that I'm sure Penn State will be interested in, and he'll be playing, for a top 25 program. But Holy Cross has wide receiver Jalen Coker, 6'3", 213 pounds. He had 59 catches for over 1,000 yards, 15 touchdowns this year. Could be a guy that just goes into the NFL. I don't think that he'll necessarily be, a day 1 or day 2 type of guy, but if he jumps in the portal, could be somebody that absolutely will go to, a high-end program. And then once again, watching the follows, Ty James from Mercer. He has a couple Penn State follows already from the coaching staff. When it comes to these FCS guys, I think the most important thing is you want to see explosiveness. Just having 90 catches, but only averaging, 9.8 yards per catch isn't all that interesting to me. Yeah. Ty James had 55 catches, but once again, over 1,000 yards. Explosive kid, 6'2", 200 pounds, so good size. I think it's always important when you talk about the transfer portal that, none of these guys, or very few of these guys, are going to come in and probably be All-Americans or even going to be first team All Big Ten type of guys. But, you got to look for the right intangibles, the right, stats, things like that, because I always think about, right, say you take Jordan Vandenberg and you put him at Harvard or you put him at Penn, and what kind of stats is he going to put up at a place like that? So, you really need to see guys that dominate that at that level. And, certainly I think Coker and Ty James, as far as FCS wide receivers go, are 2 of those guys.
Well, and that's what I'll finish up in this segment with, is the fact of Mitchell Tinsley and Dante Cephas. Yeah, they were lighting up the stat sheets in their respective conferences with the programs, Western Kentucky and Kent State. But as you can see, the Big Ten competition is just a little bit faster, I would say a lot faster, a lot stronger, and just a lot more difficult when it comes to processing the game as well. I think Mitchell Tinsley performed better than Cephas, but still at the end of the day, there were high expectations, and neither of those guys really lived up to them. So Penn State, I think, needs to have a more concerted effort of trying to get guys who are experienced at the Power 5 level, because we've seen that. Look what Arnold Ebiketie did. Temple's Power 5, right? Temple's Power 5, and Ebiketie did very well. Derek Tangelo shattered expectations. Power 5 came over, had successful but I'm not saying that's a one size fit all, because look at
Yeah.
Jaquan Brisker and Jair Brown, Lackawanna Community, JB Nelson, Lackawanna Community College, and they come over, and JB Nelson could have arguably been the second best offensive lineman this year for Penn State, behind, of course, Olu Fashanu. And then you look at the Jair Brown and Jaquan Brisker, look at what they're doing in the pros.